Hey everybody, this is Rich Stroffolino with Gestalt IT, and it's time for the Gestalt IT Rundown. We're going to be doing it this week, but we're going to be doing a pared down version. We're still going to be covering the IT news of the week that you want to hear and everything like that. It just didn't feel, though, given everything that's going on this week, that it would be right to have our usual pitter patter and stuff like that. So we'll be back next week. Me, Tom, maybe Stephen Foskett joining along as well, and doing our usual Gestalt IT rundown, full conversation and stuff like that. This week, we're just going to be doing focused a headlines edition just to keep you up to date on the IT news of the week, and we will move on from there. So thank you for joining us. First bit of news that we had this week, appropriately enough, Cisco CEO Chuck Robbins announced in a YouTube video that the company will postpone Cisco Live, which was scheduled to start today. Robbins said that people across the US and the world are dealing with so much pain, frustration, and anger. We want to give you space this week to do what you need to do within your organizations and communities. And I think if there's one silver lining of having Cisco Live be a virtual event due to COVID-19 lockdowns, the fact that they're able to just kind of flick a switch and decide to postpone it when the mood feels appropriate. We've had situations in the past where events kind of had to go on, even in events of things like mass shootings and stuff like that in Vegas a year or two ago now. That was a very bizarre situation, to be quite frank. And the fact that those were tied to physical events kind of limited the availability to change to fit kind of current conditions. And I definitely think this was the right move, certainly the right move for Cisco. And because it's a virtual event, they're able to kind of very easily pivot on that. One of the things they probably would have announced or given some details about at Cisco Live was the intention to acquire ThousandEyes, which they was actually announced late last week. If you're not familiar with the company, you should definitely check out their Tech Field Day coverage. They've done, I think, 2 presentations while they were an independent company, so you might want to check those out. A good place to start. But they provide visibility tools for seeing how apps and packets run through multiple networks and clouds. Thing that really always stood out to me about them was their path visualization tool that really lets you see where performance problems were occurring outside of your network, kind of in that path of transit outside of your network, going to a cloud or something like that. You can kind of pinpoint that. I think it was always a really powerful capability. Cisco says they'll integrate those visibility tools across their enterprise networking, cloud, and apps dynamic portfolios. Not really too surprising there. ThousandEyes always seemed like more of an integration to me, and certainly something that would have been useful for a lot of third parties. Now Cisco kind of going to be ruling the roost with that IP there, and I think we'll fairly rapidly see that get deployed. The use cases are pretty obvious. Another acquisition news, the cloud security company Zscaler announced it intends to acquire Edgewise Networks. We heard from Edgewise at Security Field Day last year, and they bring a lot of ML acumen to network microsegmentation. So kind of 2 buzzwords there, essentially putting an agent on each hosted network to provide unique identifiers for each workload, then to use a ML engine to look at how apps are interacting. This is really able to be powered because their policy engine is counting on that individualized and unique identifiers per each workload. So when you're spinning up and down AWS instances or something like that, you're able to identify each one of those as opposed to, okay, it's coming from just one source. I'm going to put an ID on that kind of stuff. Really a powerful capability, and gives with that policy engine based on ML built in, that's kind of constantly scanning for those interactions. A very powerful network. I wonder if this is going to be more of an acqui-hire for Zscaler. They already have a pretty robust cloud networking security stack that they're going to be doing, a lot of talent edgewise. So we will see, how much of this is actually carried forward, how much is this is, hey, we picked up the team behind that's very talented. So we will see. Another news, if you didn't check out our checksum video about why the enterprise is such a desirable landing spot for a lot of maybe perceived as failed consumer AR products or augmented reality products, we were talking a lot about companies like, or products like Google Glass, Microsoft HoloLens, and of course, Magic Leap. And now Business Insider obtained a memo from Magic co-founder and CEO Tony Abovitz to employees, saying that he will step down and the company is actively recruiting candidates to replace him as CEO. So if there's any doubt that the company is definitely pivoting hard to the enterprise, the fact that their CEO that kind of shepherded them through multiple highly successful funding rounds, they've had raised literally billions of dollars for this product on the vision that they would be a consumer device. They've announced that they're already planning on shifting to enterprise, looking at healthcare, oil and gas, those kind of verticals where AR has already been successful in a lot of ways with products like Google Glass and Microsoft HoloLens. The fact that he is stepping down as CEO kind of, I think, is emblematic of that complete shift for that company. We'll see. A lot of these products that we assume are failed or have not performed up to, I guess, the initial expectations, go on to have pretty successful lives in the enterprise. We'll see if Magic Leap can also follow that path. Next up, as part of Zoom's Q1 earnings report, CEO Eric Yoon said that the company will continue, or will excuse me, the company's coming end-to-end encryption features will only be for paid users, saying that it did not want to provide the end-to-end encryption for free users in order to comply with law enforcement requirements. That was the language that he used, did not want to provide. Zoom's Alex Stamos said that the company does not monitor free Zoom calls or silently record them, kind of allaying privacy concerns there, but that not having end-to-end encryption on free calls will help the company identify repeat offenders. I do wonder, though, for paid users, I mean, is that, I don't know if that's Zoom saying you're paying us, and so if you do any misconduct that we can't monitor. I don't. I kind of don't see the distinction and the difference there, but I am not a legal scholar. On the call, Zoom reported revenue of $328 million, beating analyst expectations of $202 million, and said that they had 265,400 customers with 10 or more employees, a 4 times increase on the year. We've seen a lot of numbers. We've heard that Zoom usage is way up, way up, way up. These are the first kind of quarterly earnings numbers that we've seen, and certainly those customer numbers, certainly giving specifics to the thing that we all assumed for a while now. Google and Microsoft are reportedly considering buying stakes in Indian telecom companies. The Financial Times reports that, according to sources, Google is considering buying a 5% stake in Vodafone Idea, the second largest telecom in the country. Meanwhile, the Indian newspaper Mint reports that Microsoft is in talks to invest up to $2 billion in Reliance Jio Platforms, according to their sources. And back in April, Facebook invested $5.7 million for a 9.99% stake in Reliance Jio Platforms. I included that there to give some context for how much of a stake $2 billion would buy for Microsoft, so essentially a third of that. So looking at maybe a little over a 3% stake for Microsoft. But obviously, India is a growing market, and what is interesting to see, we've already seen Microsoft make partnerships with Azure, bundling, I believe, with Reliance Jio and some other telecoms in the area, or in the country, excuse me, to kind of bundle all those services together in business packages. So, okay, you're buying internet access, you need some MSP services from your telecom or something like that. Hey, you get some Azure with it as well. I think a lot of companies, not just seeing the next billion customers when it comes to things like obviously Windows installs or something like that, phone apps and stuff like that. Now we're seeing maybe cloud business becoming a priority for a lot of these companies too. Facebook obviously has their incentives to grow their user base there, and maybe finding a way to somehow zero rate service in India. They've tried it before. Maybe having a telecom partner will get them there as well. Next up, the Raspberry Pi Foundation released a new model of the Raspberry Pi 4 with 8 gigabytes of LPDDR4 RAM, priced at $75. To better take advantage of the additional memory, the Foundation also released a 64-bit beta of the Raspbian Linux operating system, which has been renamed to the Raspberry Pi OS. So a couple of things there. One, up until now, the most memory you could get on a Raspberry Pi was 4 gigabytes, certainly 8 gigabytes. And this is fast modern memory, will certainly allow a lot more multitasking. Also opens up, I think, some new avenues for server capabilities. The big news here is it is getting more expensive. The shift to Raspberry Pi OS says maybe they have some more beyond hobbyist ambitions for this. We've seen companies like NetBees use Raspberry Pis for their network monitoring tools, that kind of stuff. Certainly, like I said, very popular among hobbyists. And for smaller projects and that kind of stuff, everybody's building their clusters. If you're not following Alex Ellis on YouTube, he does a lot of fun things with containers and Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. So check that out as well. 8 gigabytes certainly is new capabilities. I would have much preferred them to say we're giving it more I/O. Maybe that's coming in the Raspberry Pi 5. Google initially rolled out its same-site cookie labeling policy with the release of Chrome 80 back in February, which blocked third-party cookies on websites. There are some exceptions there, but it sets up much more stringent requirements for third parties to display cookies on websites. This was subsequently rolled back in April in order to not break any access to essential websites during the escalation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Google now says it's bringing back the same site cookie update on July 14th. July 14th with the release of Chrome 84, which will be gradually rolled back to the Chrome 80 release, so becoming effective for those older installs. But essentially saying, okay, we've given you now 5 months. That was enough time to kind of update your website, make sure things aren't going to break. when this does officially roll out, certainly I think it was well timed to roll that back, not standing on principle, realizing websites have to stay up when everybody is stuck at home and depending on the internet more than ever. But I think the timing here seems right. If not, let us know in the comments and please educate. Next up, OpenAI released a paper detailing its new GPT-3 language model, which is able to run with 175 billion parameters on that AI model. This compares to the current GPT-2 model, which supports 1.5 billion parameters, and Microsoft's latest transformer-based language model, which was just released last month, supports up to 17 billion parameters. So just kind of giving the scale of and the complexity that GPT-3 supports. As opposed to transformer-based learning, which, like I said, Microsoft and a lot of other models use, that needs task-specific data sets that have to be massive. GPT-3 is an autoregressive model trained with unsupervised machine learning and focuses on few-shot learning techniques. In fact, there we're looking at zero-shot or perhaps one-shot techniques, which just supply a demonstration of a task at inference runtime. No release details of the model were announced, and the paper shows that while it performs extremely well in reading comprehension, it's one of the things they tested against, it really struggled when completing comparative writing samples, kind of in the context of at a middle school level. So able to read a block of text, answer all sorts of questions about that. Comparing the two really was struggling there. Obviously, this is early days. The model isn't even out yet. They'll probably do a slow roll release, which they did with GPT-2, to prevent any kind of malware exploitation of this new model and get everybody kind of on board with the power and the complexity that this model supports. But interesting new update from OpenAI, always putting kind of at the bleeding edge of AI there. And finally, here, I wanted to finish up with Stack Overflow. They published their annual developer survey. Always interesting to look at these. These give some insights into what tools devs are using and things that have changed over the past year. JavaScript, unsurprisingly, remained the most used programming language for the 8th straight year, followed by the usual suspects of HTML, SQL, and Python. No change in that top 4 there. TypeScript overtook C and C++ for the 8th most used language. And in a separate question, they were the second most loved among respondents. Rust remained the most loved language, while Python fell to number 3 in that regard. Last year, TypeScript and Python were essentially tied for the second place in most loved language. The top 3 dreaded languages were VBA, Objective-C, and Perl. Interestingly, Perl was kind of correlated to the most salaried among programmers. So if you were a Perl programmer, you were paid the most for your suffering. Database usage remained similar to 2019, with over half of respondents using MySQL, with most developers loving Redis and dreading IBM DB2. Looking at DevOps, 81% of developers said DevOps was somewhat or very important to scaling software development, while only 43% reported having dedicated DevOps personnel in their organization. So kind of overwhelming support for, hey, DevOps is kind of a big deal, not necessarily seeing that recognized by a lot of organizations, despite what developers are saying. That about brings us to the end of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Like I said, just a very brief headlines edition today. We'll be back next Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time with our full Gestalt IT Rundown, having discussions, doing news or not, all that good stuff. You can check out gestaltit.com for more writing and stuff like that. And yeah, that just about does it for the show. Until the next time we meet, take care, everybody. Be safe. We'll talk to you next time.